Hey y'all, I'm Carrie,
I'm Momo.
and this is Monstrous. This episode contains language and topics that may not be suitable for all listeners, and topics that may be triggering to some. Listener discretion is advised. You all right over there?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so before we jump into the absolute absurdity of today's case, we want to welcome everyone back to the show.
After that long 4 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
we still don't have no answers.
I know. This one's going to be a good one, though. So.
Okay.
We're glad that you decided to join us for another week as we explore the darker and stranger corners of history and true crime. And since we're just getting started on this journey together, we want to invite you to be a part of the foundation of the show. So take a minute to rate and review and subscribe to Monstrous. It's the best way to help our community grow and ensure that you never miss a moment of the macabre. So we're building something special here, at least we're trying to. So I can't wait to see where all of these cases and stories take us. So now, I want you to clear your mind, okay? If you're ready,
Shoot,
okay, you're gonna clear your mind
there ain't nothing there to clear.
and picture and picture yourself in the spring of 1876.
Okay.
It's March 3rd in Bath County, Kentucky, specifically near a tiny settlement called Rankin, not far from Olympia Springs. It's a Friday morning about 11 a.m., and by all accounts, it's a gorgeous day.
Shoot, that was 150 years ago.
Yep. So we're getting in our Wayback Machine.
Yeah, we are.
Yep. So the sky is perfect, cloudless blue, and the air carries that crisp, hopeful scent of early spring. Mrs. Mary Crouch, a local farmer's wife, is outside on her porch. She's busy with the laborious domestic task of making soap. She's likely stirring a large pot and enjoying the rare bit of peace that she can get. The air is still and quiet until she hears a sound that she can't quite place, a rhythmic, wet snapping sound, like something heavy hitting the ground and the slats of her wooden fence. When she looks up, she doesn't see rain because there isn't a cloud in sight. Instead, she is seeing chunks of raw red flesh falling from a clear blue sky.
Ew!
And this wasn't just a piece of meat dropped by a passing hawk. This was a literal downpour, a carnal rain that lasted between 5 and 7 minutes. It was,
Nasty!
and it wasn't just a localized drip either. It covered a strip of land on the Crouch property, roughly 100 yards long and 50 yards wide.
The size of a football field.
The particulates range from the size of a delicate snowflake to thick, heavy chunks several inches across. By the time the sky went silent again, the Crouch farm looked like a slaughterhouse without walls.
I'm gonna say it again. Ew!
Fresh, bloody meat was draped over the fences, scattered across the grass, and sticking to the very porch where Mary was standing just moments before.
Talk about ruining your day.
This wasn't just a few scrapes either. Local estimates from the following day suggested that if you had gathered every grisly bit from the grass and the fences, you would have had enough to fill a full sized horse wagon. According to a correspondent for the Louisville Commercial who visited this site shortly after, the meat appeared to have been perfectly fresh.
Ew!
He noted that the ground was strewed with it, and the sight was so unsettling that it genuinely disturbed the local livestock. Can you can
As
you
is their brothers.
can you imagine like a horse being like, "Ew, no,"
The cow going, not it.
just running off like, "Ew, get me away from that." Can you just picture that? It's great.
Cow's going, not it.
Like the way they used to talk is just fantastic. I love it. So the animals, who were usually eager for any scrap of food, reportedly slunk away from the falling flesh with a sense of primal dread.
I don't blame them.
Can you just imagine?
Even the pigs are going, "Not it, not
Okay.
it."
Oh god, okay. So to truly understand the weight of this day, we have to look past the gore and focus on the woman standing in the middle of it. Mary Crouch wasn't just a witness. She was the survivor of a surreal domestic violation. In 1876, the life of a Kentucky farm wife was one of constant grinding motion. While the men worked the periphery of the property, the woman was the master of the immediate homestead. Her labor was backbreaking and often invisible until something went wrong. Soap making, for example. This wasn't just a hobby, it was a grueling multi day chemical operation. Mary would make Mary would have spent several days collecting wood ash to make lye, and rendering down animal fats. On that Friday morning, she was likely hunched over a massive iron kettle, stirring a violent boiling mixture that could blind or cause severe chemical burns with just one wrong splash. It was a dangerous technical process that required her full concentration. Being alone on a farm as a woman in that era meant inhabiting a specific kind of silence. It was the silence of a protector and a provider. And when that silence was shattered by that snapping sound of flesh hitting her home, it wasn't just a mystery. It was an intrusion into the one space that she had control over. But to look at what happened next, Mary saw it first. She was the primary observer, yet her voice was almost immediately swallowed up by the men of the county and the scientists of the coast. So if you look through the historical archives, you won't find a direct long form interview with Mary. You won't find her survivor statement. Instead, you find her experience filtered through the descriptions of male neighbors like Harrison Gill or the reporters who arrived days later. Now, in the 19th century, trauma was rarely a metric in reporting. The shock she must have felt seeing her clean porch turned into a butcher's floor was erased in favor of debating whether the meat was mutton or bear.
Hell, it could have been human for all we know.
She became a secondary character in her own life, a reliable farmer's wife whose only role was to provide the start time for the event so that the men could take over the intellectual heavy lifting.
Oh, brother.
This erasure is a common theme in historical anomalies. The person who experiences the event is often the first person the experts push aside to make room for their theories. Now, to truly understand why the locals felt so qualified to identify this meat, we have to look at a 19th century meat consumption in animal husbandry. In 1876, the average Kentuckian was intimately familiar with the anatomy of livestock. This wasn't a world of classic grabbed grocery store cuts. If you want a meat, you likely raised it, slaughtered it, and butchered it yourself.
Yeah.
This gave the average person a quote biological literacy that we lack today. They claimed it tasted either like mutton or venison, a conclusion based more on familiarity than certainty. The livestock industry in Kentucky at the time was booming, particularly with sheep and cattle. Farmers knew the exact smell of fresh soot, the grain of a deer's muscle, and the specific greasy feel of bear fat. This immediate knowledge is why the identification of lung tissue was so alarming. We're going to get to all that. You're looking at me like I'm crazy.
Well, thing's crazy.
In a community where every part of an animal was utilized from the hide all the way down to the hooves, lung tissue was a distinct spongy material that was rarely consumed, but it was frequently seen during the butchering process. Their confidence wasn't just a bravado, it was a reflection of their daily survival. So these guys are like, we know what's happening over here. So driven,
Obviously not.
driven by a mix of frontier grit and morbid curiosity, two local men, Bill Ellington and Harrison Gill, decided that looking at this meat wasn't enough, and they had to know. So right there in the mud of the Crouch farm, they picked up samples from the sky flesh and ate them.
Ew! Oh! Look!
Why
Oh
are
my
you
god!
why are you covering your mouth and nose?
No! No! People were so stupid back then.
Oh god. They stood there chewing, eyes narrowed, calmly debating the flavor profile like they were at a Sunday social.
Oh,
Their verdict? It was too greasy to be deer, and it didn't have the right grain for beef. To them, the taste test was the most honest science available. Bill Ennington was quoted as saying, "It is either mutton or venison, but if I were to name it, I should say it was the meat of a bear." However, the meat shower wasn't the only atmospheric oddity of the decade. The 1870s were a period of bizarre meteorological activity that left scientists baffled. So we have to look at things like the Great Lakes sieges, sudden dramatic changes in water levels, the reports of red rain and colored snow across the globe. In 1870, a shower of red matter was reported in Italy, which scientists eventually attributed to desert dust from the Sahara mixed with rain. But the Kentucky event was different because its solid biological nature. There's no simple explanation for it.
somebody blew up a bear.
The weather in 1876 was also influenced by the tail end of the Little Ice Age, leading to erratic climate patterns. While the day of the meat shower was calm, the general atmosphere of the decade was one of unpredictability. This fueled the whirlwind theory. The idea that the idea was that a distinct storm had sucked up a carcass and deposited it miles away.
It's called a tornado.
Now, the likelihood of this is small.
Yeah, yeah. Still dumb.
So it's important to understand that people in the 1870s were regularly witnessing freak weather events that made almost anything seem possible. So even though we know today the likelihood of it being a tornado sucking up a carcass,
It's slim to
ripping
none.
it to shreds, and then dropping it across one property is, like you said, slim to none. Back then, they didn't have a fucking clue. So it's also worth noting that on the day of the Kentucky meat shower, which that's what it's known as, by the way, there were no reports of storms, tornadoes, or water spouts within dozens of miles of Bath County. So that also makes the storm thing not possible. This lack of severe weather is the final nail in the coffin for that whirlwind theory. There simply wasn't a localized vortex capable of lifting a massive animal and carrying it through a cloudless sky. Now, while some looked at the heavens for a meteorological answer, others looked at the biology of the ground itself, leading to the most famous scientific false start of the entire case. A chemist named Leopold Brandeis, I think that's how you say it, published a widely read theory that the meat, quote, meat, wasn't animal at all. He claimed it was Gnostic, a type of cyanobacteria also known as star jelly or witch's butter. So Gnostic is it honestly it really is fascinating. So it stays dormant and invisible when it's dry. But after it rains, it swells up into like a translucent flesh colored jelly blob. This guy argued that the Kentuckians had just seen old algae that had been rehydrated and that it wasn't meat at all.
That don't make no fucking sense.
So his theory fell apart for
No
one
shit.
for one simple reason. Can you guess what that is? It hadn't rained.
That's true.
So how did it get wet to become a jelly blob?
You got a garden hose.
The ground was dry and the sky was completely clear. Furthermore, as I said, the locals tasted it. Gnostic might look like jelly, but it doesn't have the saturated muscle fiber or the smell of burning mutton that the scientists in New York would eventually identify. Truly grasp the magnitude of this event, we have to look at the timeline of how this news broke and how the world reacted to it. In 1876, news didn't travel at the speed of a tweet like it does today. It traveled by telegraph and rail, gaining a layer of local favor and exaggeration at every single stop.
Oh, yeah, it's like when you play that one game where you say something.
Telephone.
Yeah, it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
And it takes forever for the news to travel.
Yeah, because they can't pick up a iPhone like we do nowadays.
Right, exactly. So on March 3rd, the carnal rain, quote, occurred. By March 4th, the local gossip in Bath County had reached a fever pitch.
Oh, I bet.
That's all they had in the 1800s.
It's not like we got oh, it's not like they got, games to play and
Right, exactly.
that's funny.
So neighbors like Harrison Gill and B.F. Ellington were already on the scene documenting the physical evidence. Gill noted that the meat was scattered over a wide area and emerged from his examination convinced it was composed of various animal parts. Then by March 6th, the story had hit the local Kentucky papers. The, the Louisville commercial was one of the first to provide a detailed account. Their correspondent described a scene of unparalleled mystery. They were the ones who first reported that the meat looked like fresh beef, but that it had a spongy texture in some places.
Ew. Just
Your face.
ew.
On March 10th, the story went national. The New York Times published a piece titled Flesh Descending in a Shower, which brought the Kentucky meat shower to the dinner tables of Manhattan. This sparked a wave of letters to the editor from armchair scientists and skeptics alike. One reader suggested that it was a massive migrating jellyfish caught in a water spout despite Kentucky being landlocked.
That's funny. Oh, I can only imagine some of the shit that come out of there.
Okay, so before microscopes arrived, in the 1970s, Kentucky was a place where folklore and deep religious conviction often provided the first framework for understanding the impossible. And when the meat began to fall, the immediate reaction was not scientific at all. It was spiritual.
Oh, brother.
Oh, that's where that goes. I was like, well, that doesn't make any fucking sense. Okay. So before microscopes arrived, sermons did. For many in the surrounding community of Olympia Springs, a shower of blood and flesh was seen as a terrifying omen.
God's gonna get you.
In a post Civil War South, many residents were still grappling with the trauma of conflict, and a sign from the heavens was frequently interpreted as a precursor to war, famine, or the apocalypse. This wasn't just superstition, it was a deeply ingrained worldview.
Oh, yeah, back in those days, everybody went to church.
hmm So, Kentucky, who was still shaped at the time by the legacy of the Second Great Awakening, remained deeply rooted in vibrant revival culture. People were used to looking for the hand of God in the mundane. Local ministers took to their pulpits that Sunday to address the event, and their words carried more weight than any newspaper could. They reached for biblical parallels, the plague of blood in Egypt, or the manna from heaven that fed the Israelites in the desert. But this manna was raw, bloody, and foul smelling after a few hours in the sun. Could you imagine
No.
what their farm smelled like? Oh my God.
Yeah, no.
You would have to Lysol everything. Like,
They
you would
didn't,
need all the Lysol and air freshener in the world.
and
Okay.
they didn't.
And they didn't have that shit back then. Ugh. So ministers asked their congregants, if the Lord sends bread to the faithful, what does he send to the unrepentant? The meat shower was framed as a carnal warning, a literal manifestation of the blood of the land. In a region where the ground had recently been soaked with the blood of brothers during the war, the idea of the sky echoing that carnage felt like a divine rebuke. For the people sitting in those pews, the what of the meat mattered much less than the why. The local fascination quickly turned into a scientific puzzle that transcended the borders of Kentucky. Within weeks, the story had crossed the Atlantic. The London Times and several European medical journals began to speculate on the Kentucky phenomenon. In the United States, newspapers from San Francisco all the way to New York were engaged in a war of theories. Could you fucking imagine opening your newspaper one day and just seeing these debates between newspaper articles on what they think this is?
It was pretty funny.
That would be
Just
great.
see some of the stupid answers.
I know. Oh, I lost my place. Okay, sorry. Okay. The San Francisco Daily Evening Post described the substance as looking like fresh beef, but noted that it had a very peculiar structure. To understand the gravity of the mystery, we have to look at the microscopic analysis conducted by the medical professionals of the day as well. Dr. A. Mead Edwards, who was the president of the Newark Scientific Association, had analyzed a sample of this meat and concluded that it was definitively animal tissue, specifically identifying it as striated muscular fiber. But the mystery then deepened when other scientists got involved. Dr. J. W. S. Arnold, who was a professor at the University of the City of New York, examined the specimens and confirmed they contained not just muscle, but also animal fat and, probably most bizarrely, elements that looked like the connective tissues of a lung. Ugh. New York Times famously quoted a scientist who had
Are you
suggested,
having issues, my dear?
no, it picked up the motorcycle.
Oh,
Uh, who
it's probably
suggested,
dad.
yeah, I think it was, who suggested that the lung tissue was so well preserved that under a microscope, the individual air cells were visible. Now, to understand how this mystery was dismantled, we have to look at the tools of Victorian scientists and like the ones they actually used. When those jars of preserved flesh arrived on the desks of men like Dr. Alan McLean Hamilton, they weren't just looking at them with the naked eye. They were deploying the cutting edge of the 19th century forensic technology. At the center of that work was the compound microscope. Now, by the mid 1870s, makers like Joseph Jackson Lister had perfected achromatic lenses. And when Dr. Hamilton sat down to analyze the Kentucky samples, he would have been using a heavy brass tubed microscope, likely illuminated by a simple oil lamp and a concave mirror. So, first, the samples had to be prepared through a process called thin sectioning. Before the widespread use of microtome, which is a machine that slices tissue into translucent slivers, a pathologist would have had to use a straight razor,
Yeah.
sharpened to a surgical edge to shave off a piece of the meat thin enough for light to pass through it. Isn't that wild just to think
Oh, yeah.
how different things were and how different, like forensic technology and stuff was back then?
Oh, yeah.
Wild. So once it was sliced, the tissue then had to be stained. This is where the 19th century chemistry begins to get colorful. To differentiate between a muscle fiber and a piece of lung, researchers use dyes like carmine, which is derived from crushed cochineal insects or logwood extract. These stains would then bind to the nuclei of the cells, turning them into a deep red or purple, allowing the scientists to identify the striated patterns that prove a sample is voluntary muscle or the alveolar structures that prove it's lung. So another vital technique used was maceration. If the sample was too tough to slice, they would soak it in a solution of potassium bichromate
Oh,
or dilute nitric acid, which would slowly break down the connective glue of the tissue, which allowed the fibers to be teased apart with fine needles. This is a process known as dissociation.
okay.
Now, it was through this painstaking picking apart of the Kentucky debris that Dr. J. W. S. Arnold was able to confirm that he wasn't looking at a fungus or a plant, but the complex, multi layered architecture of a mammal's internal organs.
Ew!
They also utilized what is called hydrostatic testing, and it's a common diagnostic method that was used at the time. So, while hydrostatic testing today usually refers to the pressure testing pipes or tanks, in the 19th century medicine, this test was a specific type of forensic technique that they used in order to determine if a lung had ever breathed air. So, for this test, they would place a piece of meat in water, and if the piece of the tissue floated in the water, then it suggested the presence of air, which was a hallmark of lung tissue.
Right.
If it had sunk, it was more likely dense muscle or liver, or it was lung tissue that had never breathed air. This wasn't the only test that they had run, though. When the scientists in New York heated the samples over a Bunsen burner, which at the time was a relatively new invention, they weren't just looking for a smell. They were performing a primitive form of chemical analysis. The smell of burning nitrogenous matter confirmed that it was animal protein, effectively killing that star jelly theory once and for all. So, to get to the bottom of the vulture theory, okay, we have to look at the work of the Dr. L.D. Castenbein, who wrote about the event in the Louisville Medical News in late 1876. Could you imagine being a doctor and picking up a medical journal and somebody's talking about a fucking meat shower?
Your brain would go, "Huh?"
Like,
Then he'd go, "Ew."
I'd be like, okay, I'm done with this journal. This is shit.
You guys are idiots.
Okay. So he dismissed the idea of star jelly or Gnostic bacteria almost immediately. He pointed out that Gnostic is a type of algae that can appear suddenly after rain, but it does not contain animal cells.
It didn't rain though.
So when he applied heat to the Kentucky samples, they gave off the unmistakable smell of burning meat.
Barbecue.
So Castenbein's conclusion was grounded in the biology of the New World vultures. But to say vultures did it isn't just a lazy dismissal. It's actually a look into one of the most fascinating and honestly misunderstood behaviors in the avian world. Now, it sounds weird, okay? Oh, a vulture caused it. Sounds weird, okay? And you
I don't
probably
know, some of them bad boys got pretty big.
that's what I'm saying. You probably think I'm crazy, okay? Everyone listening probably thinks I'm crazy, but just go with me for a minute, okay?
I don't know if I want
You
to.
might end up on the same, like, maybe that I am. So in Kentucky, you're going to be dealing with two main species of vultures. You have the turkey vulture and the black vulture. Turkey vultures are solo hunters with an incredible sense of smell, while black vultures are more aggressive and social birds that hunt by sight. So both species practice what's called group feeding. When a large carcass is found, so a cow or a horse, word spreads. You don't get just one vulture, you get a wake of dozens and sometimes even hundreds of vultures feeding on these carcasses. Modern ornithologists point specifically to the turkey vulture as the most likely culprit of this. While black vultures stay lower to the ground, turkey vultures are masters of the sky. They ride thermals up to 20,000 feet.
Oh, yeah, there's for airplanes up yeah, they got the idea for airplanes now. Thank you, though.
It did. So, this height is crucial. It explains how the meat could fall with enough terminal velocity to create that rhythmic slapping sound that Mary heard against her fence. It wasn't just falling, it was plunging to the ground.
Yeah, 'cause it's going all the way to the ground.
Now, vultures are heavy birds, and and after a massive feast, they are almost bleh. And after a massive feast, they're even heavier than before.
They the fat boys.
Exactly. So this is where the physics of the vomit comet comes in.
Ew! Oh my god!
You just broke everyone's ears.
I don't care. Nasty. Imma quit recording with you.
So vultures have a highly evolved defense mechanism, regurgitation. When a vulture is startled or they feel too heavy to be able to take off quickly from a predator, it empties its crop, which is a muscular storage pouch near its esophagus. And they do this to lighten its weight for an immediate ascent. And this isn't just a dribble, like it's not a little bit. This is a powerful projectile discharge of partially digested, but often still relatively fresh meat.
That's just nasty.
Hey, it's
Not saying nothing, I'm just
I
saying that's
didn't do it.
nasty.
I didn't do it. It's just the facts, okay?
Oh, that's just wrong.
In 1876, the carcass economics of the region meant that large animals often died out in the open. So if a massive kettle of vultures were riding a thermal, so a column, which is a column of rising warm air, they c- they could be hundreds of feet up, circling in a wide formation. Now, if that flock was spooked by a sudden noise or a hawk, they could have all discharged their stomach contents at once. So now it is important to clarify here, okay? The vulture theory explains the how, not the which. It explains how the meat got into the sky and why it fell in that specific pattern, because it only landed on the Crouch farm. So, if it was a big flock of vultures who had just ate, that would make sense. but it doesn't mean that the vultures themselves were the source of the tissue. So the meat likely came from a large mammal that they had been scavenging earlier that morning, a horse, a cow, a bear, as some suggested, and it most likely had died in a nearby field. Historically, humans have loathed scavengers. We typically see them as ghouls, but wildlife biologists today confirm this behavior is entirely plausible. There are modern reports and wildlife agency accounts of similar incidents of meat falls where vultures had puked and amassed over parks or homes. So this theory isn't unfounded. The Kentucky meat shower was simply a massive scale version of this biological reflex, caught by the wind and sorted by the physics of terminal velocity. Now, to modern biologists, this explanation is unremarkable, but to people in 1876, it was grotesque and therefore
Wonder them.
and therefore completely unacceptable. Not possible because it's disgusting.
This is wrong.
Now, this behavior is not random. It's a built-in survival reflex. Under the right condition, that reflex scales. So, to understand why this theory was met with such resistance by the public in 1876, we have to look at the cultural perception of these birds during the late 19th century. So, in the post Civil War South and the frontier regions of Kentucky, the vulture, or the buzzard, as it was most commonly known, was more than just a scavenger. It was a powerful symbol of death, decay, and the aftermath of battle. So, to suggest that a shower from the heavens was actually the projectile vomit of a scavenger was more than just gross. To the Victorian sensibility, it was an insult to the dignity of the landscape and the perceived holiness of the signs that they had been looking for. So, in American lore of the time, vultures were often seen as ghouls of the air. They were the birds that hovered over the battlefield of Antietam and Gettysburg, and their presence was linked to the grim reality of unburied bodies. Because of this, the idea of the meat shower had an almost poetic, if not terrifying, quality when people thought that it was a supernatural event. There was a sense of awe in the idea of the sky raining flesh, though, as well. However, when Dr. Hastenbein introduced the vulture vomit explanation, that awe was replaced by a visceral stomach churning disgust.
No shit.
To truly visualize how this meat was distributed across the Crouch farm, we have to look at the fluid dynamics and physics of falling organic matter. In a dead calm atmosphere, as was reported for that day, gravity is the primary force, but it's mediated. There we go. But it's mediated by the aerodynamic drag of the object itself. When scientists analyzed the debris, they noticed something peculiar about the shredded nature of the tissue. A piece of flesh falling from a great height doesn't just plummet like a stone. Its shape di- dictates how it interacts with the air. The chunks of lung tissue, being porous and light, would have had a much lower terminal velocity than a dense piece of muscle or cartilage. As these pieces fell, they would have tumbled and drifted, creating a sorting effect in the air. So, this explains why witnesses found different types of tissue concentrated in different spots. The heavier and denser the muscle, the heavier, denser muscle would have stuck to the ground with more force, which caused that slapping sound that Mrs. Crouch described. While the lighter air filled lung tissue would have drifted down more like large snowflakes that she had mentioned in her initial accounts. Then the distribution pattern. So a strip of land 100 yards long and 50 yards wide is a classic debris field or footprint that we would see in modern forensics when something disintegrates in midair. So if a flock of vultures was moving linearly across the sky, perhaps following a specific wind current or thermal, and they began to discharge their stomach contents, the forward momentum of the birds combined with the gravitational pull would create exactly this kind of oval on the ground below. So you heard it here first. We solved it. It was vultures.
Ew.
So the width of 50 yards suggests a wide formation of birds. So there were a lot of these things.
No shit.
While the 100-yard length indicates the duration of the event as the flock moved through that specific patch of air. Now, the chaos surrounding the Kentucky meat shower was wild. And we have to look at the landscape of the American media in 1876 because, woof. This was the precursor era to what we'd later call yellow journalism, which was a time when sensationalism was already rewarded, even if the term had yet to be coined. But there was a darker undercurrent here as well, classism. The, close, the coastal papers, or the intellectual giants of like New York and Chicago, saw the meat shower as the perfect opportunity to mock rural America. They leaned hard into backwoods gullibility narratives. To a reporter in a Manhattan high-rise, the idea that farmers in Kentucky were eating meat off the ground wasn't a mystery to be solved, it was a joke to be told. The rural witnesses, including the Crouches, were treated as curiosities rather than human beings. The papers portrayed them as simpletons who were probably seeing things or pulling a prank for attention. We see parallels to this in modern viral stories. Think about, Florida man stories or rural UFO sightings, how often they're treated with immediate snark before any facts are ever found. The media turned a terrifying personal event for Mary Crouch into a punchline for city dwellers. This divide between the local papers defending witness accounts and coastal outlets treating the story as absurd became a quiet battle over who got to define reality. The person who stood in the rain of meat, or the person who writes the headline 800 miles away. When news first broke in the Louisville commercial, rival papers in the region were immediate with their skepticism. The Louisville Courier Journal, edited by the legendary and often cantankerous Henry Watterson, initially treated the story with a level of snark that was typical for the time. They didn't just doubt the meat, they doubted the sanity of the people of Bath County. So, like, they're all fucking crazy. Okay,
Yeah,
this
they
shit
are.
isn't real. For the Courier Journal, the commercial was a sensationalist rag that would believe anything, and they saw the meat shower as a prime opportunity to fame their competitor as a peddler of hoaxes. So this one newspaper is like, these motherfuckers over here in Bath County are crazy. Okay, there's no
It
damn meat falling from the sky. They're psychotic. And the other paper is like, oh, this didn't happen. This isn't real. This is a hoax created by the other paper over there. That's how media works, people. Even in today's world, it's not much different. The accusation of fake news wasn't just local either. As the story moved towards the East Coast, the New York Times and the New York Herald began their own dance of disbelief. The Herald, known for its more daring and sometimes embellished reporting, leaned into the mystery, while the Times took a more stuffy intellectual stance, mocking the idea that the laws of physics could be suspended in a Kentucky field. While the event in Bath County is the most famous instance of this bizarre phenomenon, it is far from an isolated incident. So, are you ready to hear about some others?
not really, but you're gonna tell me anyway.
So, to understand this meat shower as a recurring anomaly in American history, we have to look back even farther to 1850 in Sampson County, North Carolina. On a clear afternoon in February of that year, a shower of flesh and blood fell on the farm of a man named Thomas Clarkson. Much like the Crouch Field, the area covered was about 30 feet wide and 60 or 70 feet long. The witnesses described it as looking like brains and liver, and the smell was reportedly so offensive that the locals couldn't stay near it for long. Another similar event occurred in 1841 in Wilson County, Tennessee. Witnesses reported a shower of what appeared to be blood and small pieces of flesh falling over a tobacco field. What?
Telling you to quit smoking.
Right.
Back in those days, they were smoking something good because
The workers there described the sound of a fine mist of rain, followed by larger clots of matter.
could you imagine opening the door? The house
Absolutely not.
is like,
I
ew.
would close my door and go back to bed.
No, because then you'd have nightmares.
Nope. Close my door, go back to bed, wake me up when it's over. I'm good.
I ain't cleaning that up.
When
That'd
the
be my response.
when the local
Not yet.
when the local doctors in Tennessee arrived, They found the tobacco leaves stained red and covered in a substance that, when dried, resembled leather.
Because he's fat.
Mhm. These incidents were reported in newspapers of the era, though documentation is limited and details vary, placing them somewhere between historical record and regional folklore. Now, as the 20th century rolled in, the story of the meat shower transitioned from a news item to a piece of quintessential Americana. It was featured in Ripley's Believe It or Not and became a favorite anecdote for science teachers trying to explain the importance of the microscope. Now, today, you might think that after 150 years, all the evidence would have rotted away. But the meat shower actually has a physical legacy. In 2004, a professor named Kurt Godey at Transylvania University in Lexington, Kentucky, was poking around the archives when he found an old yellowed glass jar.
Crap.
Inside, floating in a murky preservative, was a single graying chunk of the original 1876 meat.
At least somebody was smart enough to preserve it so
Maybe
somebody
now.
with some sense could figure it
Right,
out.
maybe now they can figure out what it is. So this sample was allowed for some modern curiosity testing, just a little bit. While the DNA was too degraded to give us a specific species, so it can't tell us that this Bessie over here, the cow, is who contributed the meat. It did, though, confirm once and for all that the material was definitively animal tissue, specifically lung and cartilage. So this was not a hoax, and it's not star jelly, and it most definitely is not an alien organism. It is a piece of an earthbound animal that somehow ended up hundreds of feet in the air. But here's the chilling part. In the right light, Professor Godet noted that some of the samples still retained a faint, ghostly pinkish hue, as if the tissue were still trying to convince the world that it had just fallen yesterday. Now, according to local historical accounts, a small preserved sample was kept for years, and it was potentially displayed at the Bath County History Museum, though its current whereabouts are not certain.
I don't wanna know.
This stands as a grim reminder of the day the heavens opened up with a horse wagon full of flesh, leaving a permanent mark on Kentucky folklore and a permanent question mark in the annals of strange science. So, why are we still talking about this today? Why does a 150-year-old story of bird vomit and bloody grass still captivate us? It's because of how we explain the unexplainable. We live in a world of data and instant answers, yet we still crave the impossible. People resist mundane answers like digestion and bird reflexes because they feel small. We want the meat shower to be a glitch in the matrix, a sign from God, or a rift in time. A mystery feels like it has a soul. A biological explanation feels like an autopsy. Folklore outlives fact in every way because it carries the weight of the human experience. The Kentucky meat shower didn't fall because people were ignorant. It endured because people needed the sky to mean something. To this day, the town of Olympia Springs hasn't forgotten. They still hold local festivals, and you can even buy meat shower themed treats.
Thank you.
The event has moved from a terrifying portent of doom to a quirky piece of Appalachian pride. In a universe that often feels cold and random, the idea that the sky could suddenly and violently provide, even if it's terrifying, is more meaningful than the idea that we're just standing under a flock of sick birds. So,
Butcher shop blew up. It makes more sense than the bird.
a butcher shop in a rural area on a random farm somewhere that nobody knows about.
Yeah, it blew up and the wind caught it. It makes more sense than what they were talking about.
I'm sorry, I feel like the vultures did it. Yep, I'm gonna need me a sweatshirt that says the vultures did it. That's what I'm gonna need.
You know.
So we look at the clear blue sky and we want to believe that anything could happen, that anything is out there. Mary,
Hey, anything's possible.
right? Mary Krauss didn't just get an answer from the sky that day. She got told a story that the world would never stop telling.
She got a damn heart attack is what she got. Scared the snot out of her.
March 3rd, 1876. For Mary Crouch, the sky finally gave her something. Now, as we leave the bloody fields of the 19th century and the digestive habits of scavengers behind, we're going to look forward to next week for our next journey. We'll take you aboard a luxury liner where the vacation ended and the mystery began. It was a beautiful Saturday morning sailing between islands, but on one deck, a cabin door was left slightly ajar. Inside, a passport, money, and personal belongings were all in place. The only thing missing was the young woman who had slept there hours before. This disappearance is not a simple case of a person overboard. It's a baffling void in the middle of a crowd. This case quickly left the jurisdiction of the cruise ship, crossing international borders and chasing widespread rumors of forced labor. Witnesses offered strange accounts of a possible struggle. We explore the international search and the chilling theory that someone may have been waiting for her. We'll share the heartbreaking testimony from an eyewitness who claims to have seen her months later alive and in distress. This case is officially decades old, and the people who took her are still out there. For her family, the nightmare has never ended. But even after all these years, the trail hasn't gone completely cold. Even with this, though, we're left with two questions. What price did she pay for her dream vacation? And why, after all this time, is the FBI still getting tips but are still unable to find her? So be sure to come back next Monday because we're looking at the shadows that linger on the ocean, where, according to the powers that be, says someone can walk out of their cabin and simply vanish. This is an episode that I've spent the last few months working on behind the scenes. So make sure you're subscribed and you hit that notification bell so you know when that episode drops on Monday. This is a case you do not want to miss because not only is this an unsolved mystery of a true crime case, you may just be the person with the right information needed to bring this woman home.
I hope so.
All right. And that's where we're going to leave after today. I thought that was a good one for this week.
That was nasty.
Good change of pace, though.
Yeah, I
Very
agree with you on that.
interesting.
Yeah, but still, ew.
Yeah, it's gross and it's weird, but I thought it was fun.
And sorry if y'all heard the eardrums, y'all.
Yep, I thought that was a good one.
See, I didn't do it that time. My legs, they moved.
It was me. Sorry, I knocked my cup over.
It was loud.
That's 'cause it's heavy.
I try washing them.
I know. But yep, that one was fun. I can't remember where I found this one at.
Still left it there.
Oh no, I remember when I was looking for the emu war. I found this one.
I remember that one.
Yep, that's when I found this one. And I was like, I have to do this one because it's great. Yeah. So, you got anything else?
No, I'm sure I used them enough already today.
Okay. So, guys, we appreciate you, like always, getting through another episode with us. Means a lot that you come every week. Make sure you give us a rate and a review so we can continue to grow our community. Make
Come
sure
see us, y'all.
you are subscribed, whatever platform you're listening to right now. That way you can get the new episodes, any breaking news, anything like that that we put out. We read all of our reviews as well. I also try to make sure I respond to each one of them. If you comment on YouTube, I'm able to respond to those. So I try to make sure I respond to each and every one. These reviews help new listeners find us as well as these comments. If you, oh, there it is. If
If
you,
if you have a question for either one of us,
yep, yep, put that on
still
there.
relate it to me.
We will answer that in the next episode after I see it. We'll respond obviously on there as well, but we'll make sure to put it in the podcast because you probably aren't the only one wondering the question. If you want to see what's going on between episodes, see the pictures, videos, anything like that that goes through our cases, those are on our socials, which are linked inside the episode description. You can also find our Buy Me a Coffee link there. If you have a case suggestion or personal tale you'd like us to share on the show, you can send that in an email, which is also in the episode description for you guys to find easily. We've got more coming for you. In the meantime, make sure you stay safe out there. Watch for falling meat. We hope you keep listening, and as always, remember to
Watch out for monsters.
and don't kill people. Bye, y'all. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.